You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, sponsored by Essentia Health.
It only takes one step, twist, or crunch to know something doesn't feel right. Essentia Health's orthopedic and sports medicine team gets you back to doing what you love with commitment, resilience, intention. We're here to keep you moving forward. Visit essentiahealth.org to learn more about orthopedics and sports medicine, like nowhere else.
Hello and welcome to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health. I'm Matt Wellens, the Bulldogs hockey beat writer at the Duluth News Tribune and the Rink Live.
And I'm Zach Schneider, the television voice of UMD hockey on My Nine Sports.
Joining us this week on the podcast is a former captain of the Bulldogs men's hockey team. He's a two-time national champion and was the most outstanding player in the 2019 NCAA tournament. Now he's a member of the Boston Bruins scouting staff. Welcome back to the podcast, Irma's own Parker Mackay. Hey, Parker, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. And thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, one of the original guests of the podcast back on here. It's great to have you. I feel like we have to start off asking, how is Irma doing? I ran into your parents a couple weeks ago at Amsoil Arena and chatted with your mom and dad. Wasn't really appreciative that your dad was wearing a Buffalo Bills hat right before they were playing the Packers, but it was still nice to see him.
Yeah, it's been great. It's fun to pop back home every once in a while and see the family. And as usual, the ranks are full and a lot of teams going and some up and comers that hopefully can make a name for themselves in the future.
It's funny that you're on the podcast at this time of year because my wife and I were just doing a little before winter cleaning of the house, and she pulled out the Irma Tigers hat that was sent to us. And it's like, do we need this? I said, we absolutely need that, because you know when I'm going to end up at an Irma softball game and I need to have the proper hat to go with it. So I didn't let her throw that out a couple of weeks ago.
No, absolutely. It's becoming more of a baseball town. Fastball's been kind of taking a back seat, but it's fun to see and hear some of the kids and some of the teams that are already doing so well in the baseball side of things.
So if you want to learn all about Irma, if you're new to the podcast, you got to go back to season 1. It's one of our early episodes with Parker. You can learn all about Irma in that episode. Today we have Parker on because he's part of a growing group of former Bulldogs, recent graduates of UMD, in fact, that have entered the scouting ranks in the NHL, both men and women. Brigette Lacquette is a pro scout with the Chicago Blackhawks, where there's tons of Bulldog ties. Norm McIver's the assistant GM. Derek Plant, now an assistant coach. Another pro scout to come out of the UMD women's team is Sidney Morin, a recent guest on the podcast. She's working for the Carolina Hurricanes. Parker, you're in season 2 now, right, with the Boston Bruins?
Yep.
How'd you land this job? How does one become an NHL scout?
Through some ties, actually, at UMD. I was approached last July by Derek Plant asking if I'd be interested in speaking with the Bruins. I think Jamie Langenbrunner reached out to them. He's now assistant GM, and just asked if they knew of anybody up in Western Canada that was looking to maybe do this job. And they recommended me or threw my name out there. So I went through the interview process and was very fortunate to land the job.
You were originally hired as an assistant coach for the Spruce Grove Saints, your former junior team in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. Why scouting instead of coaching? And was, being an NHL scout, was that anywhere on your radar at the time when Planner approached you?
No, it wasn't actually. To be honest, I was a little bit taken back by it. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I think the coaching side of things, being able to work with the players, and I got to know some of the guys, so it was a very tough decision once both jobs were on the table. But I'm super fortunate to work with an organization like Boston, an Original Six team. From the top down, the type of people that work there, they've had a huge impact on me already, and I've been able to learn so much. So it's been awesome.
What was the decision-making process like when you decided to stop playing and go into this other side of hockey? We've seen other guys do it a little bit earlier in their careers. Adam Krause left a little bit early to become the assistant coach, now the associate head coach at UMD. And Brendan Kotick, I think maybe could have still played a couple more years. You were another guy that you probably could have played, several more seasons in the professional rank, whether it be stateside or overseas. But what was that decision process like to kind of start this new chapter of your hockey life?
So for me, unfortunately, I know I spoke with you guys in Austria when I was playing there, and it was great, but concussion issues were something that I had kind of dealt with throughout my career, and ended up having one over there. It's a big reason that I went over there, and to try and get away from maybe the physicality that the game brings in North America, and didn't end up happening. So I took a rough hit before Christmas, and it is what it is, but super fortunate to be in the game, to be able to do what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. We were talking to Luke Millimak this week, to quote a Sue's quote that he admitted he threw out at us. You can't rehab the head, and things are working out pretty, we talk about Krause and youth. Things are working out pretty well. Parker, take us through a week in the life of an NHL scout, and you're an amateur college scout for the Bruins. So where are you based? How much time are you on the road? And kind of what's the territory or such, or what groups are you scouting and stuff like that, without giving away any Bruins trade secrets here or anything?
In
case that Chicago contingent planner of them are listening to the podcast.
I mean, it differs from week to week, especially this year for me. Kind of dipped my feet into the college stuff. So I'll just take you through the week ahead for myself. I'm driving down to Swift Current this afternoon, so it'll be about a 4.5 hour drive. I'll watch a game there, and then post game, usually I like to spend the night in the town that I'm in, but I have a game in Brooks the following day, so I'll drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to Medhat, booking hotels, things like that in between. So I'll stay the night in Medhat, and then I'll grab a game in Brooks, and then I'll drive after the game in Brooks to Calgary for a flight out to Winnipeg, catch Regina in Winnipeg, and then catch some North Dakota hockey on the weekend, and then fly back home. And I've got a couple days off. So in between all that, you're trying to make contact, send a couple questionnaires out to a couple players that we have on our list. And basically you're just getting to know and get a good feel for the league. In the first half, you're trying to see everybody and get ink on all the draft eligible players. And then second half of the season, you're really trying to figure out the guys that you need to key in on, and it all comes off of that. So I'm covering the Western Canadian Hockey League, and whether that's the BCHL, the Alberta Junior Hockey League, the Saskatchewan League, and then all the Western Hockey League. So from Portland to Winnipeg, and then trying to catch some college stuff in between there. So it's busy, but I love it.
What's it like for you being back in those Alberta Junior Hockey League rinks and the college rinks that you used to play in?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. A lot of memories come back when you walk into those rinks, and just to see some of the players that maybe you don't think are NHL players right now, but you certainly respect the path that they're taking, and you want to certainly realize that those types of players can make a name, and maybe even if they're going the college route, that you might see them in a couple of years, maybe wearing an NHL uniform.
How difficult is it to make that transition, Parker, from the one who's been evaluated your entire life by people like you, whether it's pro scouts or college coaches or anything like that, to now you're the one who has to watch a game and decide, in 4, 5, 6, 7 years, is this kid the person that we want on the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting, Zach. Because of the route that I took, and I was a little bit of a late bloomer, you never want to say never on kids, is what I take away from it. And that's something that Boston, obviously, the staff members say as well. Never say never on a kid. And I think it's important that you want to give these kids a chance to prove themselves. And if they're going that college route, it's important to understand the path that is there. You have 7 or 8 years, and that's what makes it difficult too. How do you project what a kid's going to be in 7 or 8 years? That's still something that I got to figure out. So
are you more, it sounds like you're more on the side of draft eligible kids, maybe free agents, the people that haven't been already drafted or involved in the Boston organization. Do you have any involvement with people that have already been drafted that are still kicking around those leagues that you might run into, or is that not really part of your role?
Yes and no to that question, I guess. Whenever you're at a Western Hockey League game or a college game or even the odd tier 2 game, there are other drafted players that, I mean, you're going to take notes on. And then as far as the guys that are prospects for us, Quinn Olson at UMD, Cole Spicer, I was able to reach out and go for dinner with them when I was in Duluth last. So creating those relationships is a lot of fun, and it's something that I enjoy. So
how involved what's the collaboration like between scouts and scouting staffs? You mentioned you're taking a look at some of the draft picks, and organizations have their development coaches and everything. How does that all work? GM, scouts, what's that like with the Bruins?
As far as within our organization, Matt, or
within the organization.
It's a lot of fun. I just had a Zoom meeting this morning with a group of our staff that does the college side of things, and you know what, you're chatting with them regularly. And then from there you have your mid-season meetings, and it is a lot of fun. There's a lot of respect within the group for opinions and things like that. And I've really enjoyed that part of it too, because it feels like you're in a little bit of a locker room setting. Even though you're not seeing each other very often on the road, there's a lot of chirps that can go back and forth through text message and things like that. So I've really loved that side of it too.
The entire staff of an NHL team is pretty spread out. Like you've said you're based out there in Western Canada. You got guys in Minneapolis, Boston. I mean, all over the globe, right?
Yeah. There's 3 of us out west, all with different roles. And then we do have some guys in the middle central area, a couple guys out east doing the Ontario Hockey League. Obviously Boston, there's a couple guys, and then we do have our European scouts as well. So there's a lot that goes into the process of drafting players, and obviously doing some signings from other leagues, whether it's professional or college. So a ton goes into it, and it's very interesting to see.
It's such a wide world when you break it down as to how many people have input or have a hand in building, what you hope is a Stanley Cup team. But I mean, even though you're not in Boston and around the guys every day like you used to be when you were playing or even coaching, is there still kind of that sense of ownership of being part of the organization? And I know the people that you're looking at right now might not be part of the Boston Bruins for several years, but is there still kind of that sense of team that you're making your contributions and hopefully going to see the benefits on the ice someday?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I've really enjoyed, growing more and more passion towards the Boston Bruins. Like whether you're watching games, you feel the losses a little bit more. Me, especially in my second year, as I continue to be more and more passionate about the whole organization, and you're meeting guys. And the more that I become or feel that I'm a part of the organization, the more that I certainly take pride in the wins and losses that both teams, whether it's Providence or Boston, has. And that's been a lot of fun too, just following along. And especially when the playoffs started last year, being able to sit down and watch each game. And you certainly realize the type of work and the grind that those guys go through for 2.5, 3 months to win a cup. And so it's been a lot of fun that way for sure.
Parker, what part of your hockey career do you feel helped prepare you the most for this job as an NHL scout?
I think honestly, all of it, from just grinding through some injuries at a young age to understanding what it takes to win, whether it's not necessarily being the most skilled player on the ice or team on the ice for that matter, but just the details that go into and the preparation that go into every game that allows you to win. The importance of having depth. I want to say goaltending obviously is important too. So just understanding what goes into winning and the details that need to go into it. But at the same time, I think that it's important to realize that there's a lot, how do I want to word this? I guess just understanding that the size and strength of players that it takes and to go and play in the NHL regularly, playing with guys like Neil Pionk, Dylan Sandberg, Carson Soucy, I could go on and on. Alex Iafallo, like the skill set that is needed to play every single day in the NHL is obviously huge.
How has your perspective on the game of hockey changed over the last 2 years here? Now sitting and scouting and writing these reports on players and such, and working with other NHL scouts and general managers and front office people and such.
Yeah, I've learned a lot back when I was playing. And I think a lot of people think this way, but you look at the point production as so important. You have an average game, but you end up maybe scoring a goal late or just adding an assist, and then you're thinking that, okay, yeah, I had a pretty decent game. But on my side of things and how I view things as a scout is way different. Yes, you're checking box scores, but at the end of the day, if a kid ends up having a goal or not, that's not really the most important thing. It's how he's impacting the game regularly on a consistent basis, and some of the attributes that you need to be able to maybe crack an NHL squad someday.
How has that perspective changed maybe about the coaches that brought you to UMD? Because you're maybe a player that they could have passed on earlier in your career based on, size and physical attributes. But actually your name came up this past weekend in our conversations with Scott ahead of one of those Omaha games, just talking about how smart a player you were and how you used everything, all the physical attributes that you did have in the right ways, and were, super motivated. And so it's kind of funny that we're talking to you this week because we just had that conversation. But for them to bring you on to UMD, and then now you're a 2-time national champion, you were captain of that program. I mean, how has that changed your perspective? You mentioned earlier that, the never say never about kids is a good philosophy to have, but you're kind of living proof that you can fight through some of those other things if you have the other skill sets.
For sure. Yeah. It's not always about, I guess, the physical attributes at times. That's the part of a kid being willing to impact a game. Even if he does have 2 or 3 goals, how is he getting those goals? The compete side, like those are some things that, I mean, in this job, you say that you can't teach, or it's very hard to teach. You can get a kid to maybe be motivated for a game or two, but where's the internal compete really coming from? The hockey sense is another important one for us. And then obviously you have to have some of the physical tools too, but that is certainly the never say never on some players, is how they tick, how competitive they are, what drives them to maybe be an everyday professional and have the discipline to be a pro, because it's not easy.
Parker, what do you kind of see as your long-term career goals? You had mentioned you weren't even thinking about, being an NHL scout originally wasn't on your radar. Do you have long-term career goals as someone that maybe wants to eventually get into a front office role, or there's guys that live this life and this lifestyle for a long time and are pretty successful as scouts?
Yeah. You know what, Matt, that's a good question. I honestly, I don't set too many goals ahead. Like I'm doing the best I can to learn as much as possible. I want to soak everything in. I think that I can learn from a lot of people in this organization, and it's only my second year. If maybe in 2 or 3 years down the road, I might have a little bit more of a set path that I want to take. But right now I'm just trying to soak everything in. There's so much to learn on this side of the game, whether it's through player development or just the simple, you never know with the draft. You won't know for 5 years, essentially, if you were right or wrong on a certain player. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just to continue to learn and continue to grow and try and soak in as much as possible right now. And that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half.
This feels a little bit like, though, you're almost like your hockey destiny, because your name was brought up, by almost every single teammate that we asked, and Matt played that game about which of your former teammates, current or former teammates, are most likely to end up as a coach or a scout. And the 3 that were probably the most talked about are you, Brendan Kotick, and Adam Krause. And now look at, current day, all of you are in those roles. So it kind of feels like this was always, we wish your playing career could have continued, but it felt like this was always going to be the end for Parker Mackay in the hockey world.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I love the game. I'm super passionate about it. And I think at the end of the day, if you're not playing the game, if you can be watching it as much as I am, it's the next best thing. So I've really enjoyed it.
After you're done with that, you can be a media member like Matt and I. You'll be smarter than we are about the hockey part.
I don't know if I could. You guys do a pretty good job. I'd be I'd be weighing you down.
I was just going to say it's not a bad career getting paid to sit and watch hockey, which is what Zach and I get to do. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to have more with Parker Mackay. You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health.
Hey there, my name is Wyatt Buckner, and I'm the host of the Duluth News Tribune Minute Podcast. Hear the most important news of the day, including weather and sports from Duluth, Minnesota, and from around the Northland. Join me and my fellow reporters as we take you through the local news you need to start your day. Episodes are released Monday through Friday and are available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for supporting local journalism.
Hi, I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Explore Superior and Douglas County history with me on Archive Dive, a monthly podcast available at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health, Orthopedics, and Sports Medicine. They're proud to be the team physicians for the UMD Bulldogs and provide sports medicine care to more than 25,000 student athletes in the community to ensure they can compete at the highest level while protecting their long-term health and athletic futures. Thanks to Essentia Health for their continued support of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. I'm Matt Wellens, joined by my co-host Zach Schneider and our guest Parker Mackay. We got some rapid fire to close out this week's episode. Parker, this would be the job of a pro scout like Sid Morin, but how about you give us a scouting report on your cousin, Seattle Kraken defenseman Carson Soucy? And I'm not just talking about his hockey game here, but I want to hear about his fastball skills as well. Give us the scout's perspective on that.
Well, haven't seen Seuss play a fastball game in a while, but I'll give you one from, I guess, a couple of years ago. Good size, big pitcher, can throw heavy, puts a lot of spin on the ball. Behind the plate, I think I struck him out with a couple changeups low and outside. So if you're going to attack him, I'd say trying to get him swinging off the plate a little bit, maybe. On the hockey side, you know what? Seuss does a lot of things well. He's able to settle pucks down in his own end. He's solid there. He's reliable, plays a good defensive first game, I'd say. He's willing to engage. He's physical, and he can contribute a little bit offensively too. So
you guys get to play much fastball these days anymore? Or?
Not a ton, no. Last year, I don't know if I even played a game. I'm looking to maybe play a little bit more this summer. Last summer was just super busy. There was a lot of weddings, so to catch up on from the COVID stuff, and obviously doing the draft and things like that too. So
you mentioned Quinn Olson, Cole Spicer are both Boston Bruins draft picks. I hope this doesn't get you in trouble with the Bruins or anything, but what stands out to you about those two Bulldogs? What have you seen from them so far this year?
Quinny, smaller forward, obviously with a good motor, competitive are things that, you know what, he does well, and that's going to allow him to maybe have some success at the next level. And then Cole, smart player, honest player, I'd say 200 feet. He supports pucks well as a centerman, and he's able to contribute at both ends. For you, is that exciting to have a couple Bruins prospects that you can keep an eye on the Bulldogs this year? I'm guessing you're also professionally keeping an eye on undrafted free agents, and we won't ask you who is or maybe isn't on the Bruins radars. I know I can tell in my head who I would think is probably on their radar, but I won't make you reveal that. Yeah, it's been fun doing the college stuff again. You know what? It's a lot easier to track now that you're working on this side of it. So it's been fun to follow the Bulldogs, and especially those two players. The coolest rink you've visited to scout a game in the last 2 years? Amsoil. I was going to say, you can't say Amsoil. Outside of Amsoil. You know what's a fun one is Everett in the Western Hockey League. I enjoy that one. Good atmosphere, the way they play, and their fans are super passionate too. So I wasn't going to give North Dakota a shout out either. Not a chance. You spend a lot of time on the road. What's the best little restaurant you've encountered while out on the road scouting? I like there's a authentic Mexican spot in Calgary that I really like. It's one that I found early last year, and every time I'm in Calgary, I make a point to stop there. That, or there's a barbecue spot in Washington, like in the middle of the mountains as you're passing through the Snoqualmie. It's, again, a small little town. So I try and make it a point to not eat at the classic cliche restaurants.
That's exactly my philosophy on the road as well when I'm following around the Bulldogs. Parker, what's the best advice you have for a young hockey player who is trying to catch the eye of an NHL scout like yourself?
I think compete and consistency are huge. You can go into rinks. For me, I'll go into a rink and I'll like a kid's game. And maybe sometimes, I guess on the other side of that, if you have a bad game, it's not the biggest deal. But the compete level and the consistency and compete for me is big. And then I think just kids needing to understand that us as scouts are talking to their coaches often and asking if they're coachable. Being coachable is a huge thing. If guys are on their own page, they're usually not having as much success on the ice either. So I'd say just compete and coachability are massive. The rest can control. Those are things that you can always control. You can't control your size, how big you are, but you can certainly control that compete level and being coachable and being a good teammate.
Most scouts, if not all, play the game at some level, and most probably at a fairly high level, whether that's in college or the pros. And I would say that most scouts out there probably went through this scouting experience on the other side. Does it help having known what it's like to have somebody in the rink watching you and feeling that like that game is going to decide your entire future? As much as you tell these kids that, you know, we're going to be watching you a long time, we're going to be talking to coaches, you know, when you're in the rink, it feels like you got to have 4 goals. Otherwise you might not get your shot, right?
Yeah. I think it's important for kids to understand that there are going to be scouts at every game for sure, at certain levels, but also to just respect and enjoy the process. So many of these kids, I see some at the smaller levels that want to be in the NHL right now, or even at the junior level, they just want to be playing college now, or just understanding and enjoying the process of each level that they're at. You know what, you can enjoy junior hockey as much as the NCAA and the National League if you end up getting there. Those were some of the funnest days I spent playing the game. And I know, like, talking to teammates that are playing in the NHL right now that enjoyed the college days and their junior days a ton too, and wish they maybe would have enjoyed that process a little more.
All right, Parker, last question here to wrap it up. You've had a few years to reflect now. Which is your favorite NCAA title, 2018 in St. Paul or 2019 in Buffalo?
That's too tough of a question, Matt. I think to be able to win 2 and go to 3 Frozen Fours is probably the stuff I enjoy most looking back.
You got to be the first one with the trophy in 19. That's all. That's from the outside looking in. It feels like that's an experience that only a handful of guys get. And Carson got it.
Yes, that is true. But honestly, like, just way too fortunate to be able to say I have to, and to have the option of picking a favorite. Maybe that's what I enjoy most.
All right. That's all the time we have this week on the Bulldog Insider Podcast. Parker, thank you once again for joining us on here.
Yes, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
You can find the Bulldog Insider Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and rate us. For more Bulldogs hockey coverage, visit therinklive.com and DuluthNewsTribune.com. Zach, what's the TV situation? UMD men are at Western Michigan and the women host Harvard.
Yeah, no TV for the men on the road against Western Michigan. So if you've got NCHC TV, you could watch the games there. The women have Military Appreciation Night on Friday at 6:00 against Harvard. That one's not on TV. And then the Saturday game at 3:00, we will have on My 9 Sports as well. And those games are on Big Ten Plus as well for the women. And we'll get a chance to make good on our failure to bring our teddy bears to the men's game. We'll have those on Saturday afternoon for the women's teddy bear toss. They were sitting on my couch. I just plain forgot them. So we'll have extra teddy bears for the women's toss on Saturday.
Thanks to our sponsor, Essentia Health, for their support of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. And thanks to all of you for listening each week. We're off next week for Thanksgiving. The Bulldog Insider Podcast will be back on December 1st. Catch you then.